After finishing off all the gang members, he stored the supplies in the system's inventory. While holding onto the gang leader's neck with one hand, Su Chen extended his other hand to the side and closed the system window. The gang leader panicked and started sweating. He knew his death was near. With a fearful look, he tried to persuade Su Chen by explaining that if he killed him now, then his superiors wouldn't let him escape and eventually they would end up killing him. Just before he could finish speaking, Su Chen snapped his neck, ending his life. He began to look at the gang leader's corpse and with a smile, he reassured him not to worry because his superiors were also going to come see him very soon. Bai Kang entered the building and upon seeing what was in front of her, she was shocked. With a surprised look, she started looking around and asked Su Chen if he had been the one who had done all this. Su Chen turned his head slightly towards her and with a smile explained that he had only been exercising all this time. He also added that there were no more supplies here, which meant they must have run out of strength from hunger a long time ago. Upon hearing this, she became somewhat confused. She started staring at Su Chen and asked if someone else could charge them. Now that they had run out of resources, she didn't know what the students were going to do. Su Chen remained silent for several seconds and began to look at her with a serious gaze. If necessary, he was willing to share some of the supplies he had just stored in his space, but this would depend entirely on their behavior. He decided to stop thinking about the matter, put his hand in his pants pocket, turned his back to her, and started heading towards the exit. He asked her to follow him as it was time to go to the girls' dormitory. Upon hearing this, she was somewhat surprised. She slightly turned her head back and while watching Su Chen gradually move away, she asked him why he wanted to go to the girls' dormitory. He left the room, put both hands in his pants pockets, slightly turned his head towards her and explained that he had just asked Xiao Feng to gather the other students there. Bai Kang grabbed the sniper rifle and also left the room. While holding onto the sniper's rope with one hand, she placed her other hand on the door, turned her head towards him, and upon learning that everyone was gathered in the girls' dormitory, she became even more surprised. In the room there were some corpses tied up and hanging from the ceiling. Amongst them was a woman who, unlike the others, was still alive and had heard their entire conversation. Upon seeing that Su Chen had supplies, with a murderous look, she decided to do something about it. Several hours later, a gray-haired man wearing a metal mask began approaching the administrative building. He was looking for a girl who had fled and caused trouble again. He entered the building and with a surprised look, he began to wonder if she had died this time. Upon entering the room, one of his subordinates informed him that the captain was still alive. While the man had his hands in his pants pockets, he looked up at the ceiling and saw the woman tied and hanging from it. He began to walk towards her and thought that this was a pity. One of the man's subordinates started running to bring down the hanging woman. Upon searching a bit, the man found a rope. He quickly grabbed the rope with both hands and began to lower the woman. The woman fell to the ground, placed one hand on the arm of the sofa, and slowly started getting up. The man approached her and addressed her as Sister Na. She had pretended to be a prisoner and had been hanging here for several days, so he asked her if she had found the sensation she was looking for. She began to look down at the ground, addressed the man as Steel Teeth, and told him that she had had a close encounter with death, so she needed his comfort. Upon hearing this, he took out a whip, held the handle with one hand and the rope with the other, then turned his body towards her. He stared at her intently and asked if she was sure. She sat on the ground, turned her back to him, and prepared herself to receive the lash. Upon seeing that she was ready, he gave her a strong whip on the back, causing her intense pain and making her start screaming. He began to look at Na and couldn't help but smile. He asked her how she was feeling now. Far from feeling pain, she had enjoyed the lash. She put her hands on her cheeks, closed her eyes, stuck out her tongue and replied to him that now she felt much better. The man sat on the couch and placed Na on his lap. While he had one hand resting on his knee, he placed the other on her waist, turned his head slightly towards her and upon remembering that she had seen everything, asked her who was the one who had stolen his supplies. She put her arm around his neck, rested the other arm on the couch, lifted her head, closed her eyes, stuck out her tongue and explained to him that the one responsible for this was a demon. Upon hearing this, he turned his head towards her and with a smile asked her to tell him the name of that demon since he was going to make him pay. Na turned her head slightly towards him and with a serious look revealed to him that the person who had stolen the supplies was Su Chen. At the same time, Su Chen and Bai Kang arrived at the girls' dormitory. Upon entering, she asked Xiao Feng why he was injured. He addressed her as the team captain and reassured her not to worry because he was fine. He also added that it was great to see that she had returned. Xiao Feng was injured and had bandages on his abdomen. While he had one hand over the bandages, He began to stare at Su Chen and asked him what he was doing here. Upon hearing this, Bai Kang turned her body towards Su Chen and with a serious look, she explained to Xiao Feng that Su Chen had said he was his savior. Su Chen turned his head towards him, started pointing at him, and upon seeing that he was badly injured, asked him to allow him to examine the wound. Xiao Feng removed the bandages and a claw mark could be seen. He explained to him that in reality, this had only been a normal scratch, but somehow, the injury was becoming more serious. Su Chen placed his hand under his chin, began to look at his wound, and revealed to him that the culprits were the gluttons, creatures that fed on humans, carrying bacteria and viruses under their nails, representing a deadly risk without medical intervention. Upon hearing this, with a lost look in his eyes, Xiao Feng started looking towards the ground and explained to him that now medicines were scarce resources and could not be found at all. Despite knowing this, he was not willing to die like this. Just before he could finish speaking, Su Chen threw him some medication. He quickly grabbed the medication and couldn't help but be shocked. Seeing so many medications, both he and Bai Kang were in shock. She quickly turned her head towards him and asked where he had gotten so many medications from. While Su Chen was holding the backpack, he slightly turned his head towards her and calmly reminded her once again that he was Xiao Feng's savior. In his previous life's official organization, there was a man whose combat power was comparable to a human-shaped nuclear bomb and was known as the God of Strikes. If this person were Lu Xiao Feng, then Su Chen's investment would not be in vain. With a serious look, Xiao Feng told him that now he owed him a favor. He knew that he definitely hadn't come here specifically to deliver the medicine to him, so he asked why he had come here. At that moment, Su Chen asked everyone to evacuate immediately as the big flood was approaching. Upon hearing this, both Xiao Feng and Bai Kang were somewhat confused. Su Chen explained to everyone that the extremely high temperatures had caused a rapid melting of the glaciers, resulting in the intrusion of seawater. Consequently, the entire school was going to be flooded. One of the girls who was in the girls' dormitory took a step forward, placed her hand on her chest, and began to stare at Su Chen. She asked the others not to believe his nonsense. She asked him where the great flood he was talking about was. She believed that he only wanted to drive them all away in order to monopolize the school's resources. Upon hearing this, Su Chen simply started looking at the girl and remained silent. She was Fang King, his classmate, a wealthy heiress and a famous female fighter in Technical University who enjoyed creating conflicts between men and women. While Fang King had her hand on her chest, she noticed that Su Chen was holding a backpack. Upon seeing this, she immediately asked him if there was something to eat inside. He refused to answer her question, and upon seeing this, she tried to take his backpack away from him. But unfortunately for her, he was not willing to let someone like her see what the backpack contained. In the blink of an eye, Su Chen stored the backpack in the system's inventory and slapped Fang King hard. As a result, her cheek swelled up and she broke a tooth. She put a hand on her cheek, picked up the tooth with the other hand, and asked him how dare he hit her. The students who were nearby couldn't help but praise Su Chen, as Fang King had been causing a commotion in the dormitories. Furthermore, she occupied a dormitory all by herself, and because of this, she had been despised for a long time. Having money from her family was useless now, everyone wanted her to leave. Su Chen slightly turned his head to the side, and upon hearing this, he realized that she wasn't very popular around here. In a matter of seconds, Fang King lost her composure. She started screaming and asked them how they, miserable lowlifes, dared to do this to her. She also added that she was going to go to her father and tell him to kill them all. After saying this, she turned her back on Su Chen and started to walk away from him. Seeing her behavior, Bai Kang turned her body towards her, and while watching how she was slowly moving away, she asked Su Chen if it was good to let her go. He took the backpack out of the system inventory again, put it on his back, slightly turned his head towards her and told her that it didn't make sense to stop her since she was looking for her father. Several minutes later, Fang King came out of the girls' dormitories and thought that all men in this country were worthless, especially Su Chen. There was no comparison with foreign gentlemen. While she was lost in her thoughts, someone began to approach her from behind. This person was Steel Teeth. He quickly covered her mouth, called her baby, and with a smile asked her where Su Chen was. Upon hearing this, she started trembling and couldn't help but feel afraid. Several minutes later, Su Chen also left the dormitories. Bai Kang and Xiao Feng approached the exit and began waving goodbye to him. He put his hand in his pants pocket and with a serious look, decided to let Bai Kang take care of the evacuation. He took out his phone and thought that the most important thing now was to harvest the Snake King. Once it mutated, he didn't know if he could obtain the ability to control water. While Su Chen was lost in his thoughts, a truck approached the area and someone started asking him for help. He began to follow the trail of the voice, and as he turned a corner, he saw that this voice belonged to Fang King. Steel Teeth had captured her and tied her to a crane. Su Chen approached her, started staring at her, and mocked her by asking if she had found her father. Upon hearing this, she started looking down at the ground again and asked for help once more. Steel Teeth climbed onto the truck, extended his hands to the sides, started looking at Su Chen, and introduced himself as Steel Teeth from the Evolution base. After saying this, he put one foot on top of the crane, rested his elbow on his knee, placed his other hand on his waist, stared at Su Chen, and with a smile asked him how dare he steal their supplies. He had thought that Su Chen was a man with 3 heads and 6 arms. With a serious look, Su Chen began to stare at Steel Teeth and asked him if he really was from the Evolution base. He started hitting the roof of the truck, turned his head towards Su Chen, and with a smile replied correct. He also added that for this meeting, he had prepared a special gift for him. At that moment, the back door of the truck began to open. Inside the truck there were several dozen of zombies. Steel Teeth extended his hand to the side and with a smile asked Su Chen if he was ready to die. He simply put his hands in his pants pockets and stood still in silence. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.